To you outside. I can just say, hey, like Joe. Markel, okay. Hello. You can use the same video to generate 50 questions. It's up to you, really. Hello, Matthew. How are you? Does that... Okay. Any one else? Hello. Is this your first? Your second? This? Your first? Where are you going to get your diapers from? What store? No, Costco.
Costco formula and diapers at Costco empty. So much cheaper. Like I can show you the price.
You know, just buy a box, take it home, just take out like 20 diapers, take it back to Costco and say it's defective.
They got shit.
Anyone else before? No, nothing? I think so. I mean, it'd be a waste of time for me to just come to class and talk about the things I enjoy because most of you may not enjoy them. Well, maybe my problem is I should prep for a class before walking in the classroom, but I don't, so. Yeah, Stephen?
You think people are making decisions more on instinct or logic these days?
Well, there are... yeah, that's too early of a question.
Too early in the morning for that one?
If I was to put your question within the context, I suppose, of relationship, imagine you and I. Can you imagine that?
No, I can't. Sorry.
Jesus Christ. If you'll just try to imagine you and I, two relatively healthy young folks. I go to a coffee shop and across the room is you. For some strange reason, you look very attractive. To me. Is it reflective? No. It's instinctual. Now, and by instinctual I mean when I see you, all of a sudden, all these feelings are generated. The next step is my feelings impose themselves on my physical body. Go to him. Ask if he wants a cup of coffee. So I move towards you. So remember, it started with instinctual feelings. And then I grab a seat. I look into your eyes as you look into mine. And then we have a conversation. Maybe I'll come to realize that you're just a scumbag. Reflectively. But my feelings are far too powerful. They will overcome what my reflections tell me about you. So I try to sabotage my observations that you have a relatively dicey background, you're no good, you're this, you're that. And eventually I say, why don't we have dinner? And then after some time, our feelings become emotions. Now we have a history. Now we wrestle for the next 10 years, and then I decide I should leave. But I'm no longer 20, I'm not 50 now. Scarred for life. Does that answer your question? The point is you have three brains, or you have three centers, or you have three bodies, however you want to view them. The first revolves around your feelings. It has its own five senses. The next is your physical body. once you have enough feelings generated inside you, your body begins to move around. And then your reflective abilities come down like a political messiah, figuring out how to protect the feelings. So it's complicated. I'm not in the mood, so let's move on. Habib, are you well? Anyone else? Isabel? Nothing. No.
What about like, or like,
Nothing. There is nothing I like. Yeah. Sorry about that. I like honey. I know, yeah. Of course, yeah.
So how would you define something as you like it? Like, for example, you obviously come here and want us to ask questions every other class. So there has to be like something that you like about like teaching in order to be coming here. So is it like unconscious that you like it, or like conscious?
Is there any other question? This is torture. Can I tell you a story? And forgive me, because most of my stories revolve around alcohol and alcoholics, or just addictions to things, or maybe just habits. Imagine that you and I are in a relationship, okay? And you don't know much about me, I don't know much about you, but we spend a good amount of time with one another, and as a result, we create stories. We go to In-N-Out, we go to McDonald's, Burger King, we go to the park, we go on a cruise, whatever the case may be, but stories are created. And those stories become the bread and butter of our relationship. They're like glue. They glue us together. Little by little, you come to realize that I have a certain habit which you don't really like, which is I drink a bit too much. And when I drink, I just go nuts. You know, I either become passive. I mean, I'm not a functional drinker. In other words, I don't drink and I don't get drunk and then become functional. I become dysfunctional. In the 1920s to all the way to 1960s, because of just the way the culture was, we had a lot of functional alcoholics. They would be drunk and yet they would go to work, they would sustain their marriage, have a good relationship with their kids, all that stuff. That's no longer the case because of the shift in our culture and changes in our psyche. Now, two parts in you come to life. One part says, Elise, he drinks too much. He's an embarrassment when you guys are in public. Leave him. There is other part who says, Elise, you've been together for about 6, 7, 8 months. You love him. Okay? So there is a part of you that is in love with me, loves me, tries to protect that particular emotion, that history. And there's a part of you that is just disgusted. Okay? And now you have to wrestle with this at night. There is something about you and about the station of our relationship, which is it's still in its youthful stage. And you say to yourself, maybe if him and I were to engage in conversation every single night, maybe if him and I were to sit and read books, maybe we were to watch the right kind of music, watch the right kind of movies, go to the right sort of meetings, and if I can exercise compassion, forgiveness, generosity, give him my time, my energy, my devotion, maybe I can help him stop drinking. So remember, in every relationship, as long as it's young, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's young, it comes with a great amount of hope. Even though there's a part of you that says, I can't really do this for too long, the hope will keep you going. Okay? Now, there is something you need to understand about compassion. There is this great story that comes from where Amir is from, India. It's about a lion cub who gets lost when he is very, 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 very young. Wakes up and doesn't know where he is, doesn't know who or what he is, but he finds himself amongst a group of sheep. And what the lion does, because lions are communal animals, they live in packs, very much like human beings. And one of the problems with living in an environment such as this, you need to be liked by other people. So you conform, you mimic, you imitate. And it's actually quite healthy. If you want me to listen to you, to pay attention to you, you have to talk like me, you have to think like me, you have to have similar feelings that live inside me. Otherwise, I will reject you, and that will hurt you. So just in case you want to be around me, you have to quack like me and smell like me. That's what we do as human beings. If you have friends, and you guys are going out on a party, and if you don't like to drink, but everybody else is drinking, if you want to be part of the tribe on a Saturday night, you will drink, and you will laugh at their silly jokes. Okay? And so, because the lion doesn't like to be an outcast, begins to mimic. And what do sheep do? Sheep go bah. And what do sheep eat? They eat grass. And that's what the lion does. And a few years pass by, and it's no longer a cub. You know, it's like Lion King now. But whenever danger comes about, this grown lion goes bah and eats grass. One day, this giant lion gets lost and finds himself amongst a pack of lions. And because he no longer remembers what he looks like, he has forgotten his nature. He begins to act and sound like sheep. And the other lions look at this little lion and say, what's wrong with him? Why is he not roaring? Why is he not like chasing after a deer or a goat and devouring it? And the alpha male of the lion pack come to realize that this lion has forgotten who and what he is. Grabs him by the neck, doesn't ask his permission, doesn't care if it's its private space, just grabs his neck by force, pulls him, and forces him to look into the water so he can see his own reflection. And for the first time in his life, this lion/sheep sees his own reflection and begins to roar. And the point I'm trying to make is sometimes compassion is not just giving you time, it's not being gentle. You know, you scream, you shout, you slap because you care. Okay. Now, because you're young and because your definition and perception of what generosity, what compassion, what education look like, you think that being soft-spoken is always the case, when in fact it's not. But you're young, you're hopeful. So you and I hang out, 10 years pass by. I come home, I scream, I shout, I'm a drunk, I'm awful to the kids. But the hope keeps this relationship going. One morning you wake up and you realize your trash bin is full. It can contain no more junk. And you pack up your bags, you grab the kids, and you leave. What happened to hope? What happened to compassion? What happened to generosity? What happened to you being a savior for me? All gone. Why? Because you become a cynic. Why did you become a cynic? We tried and tried and tried and tried and failed and failed. And unfortunately for many of us, that's how wisdom is attained. You know, hope creates this mask of illusions. Okay? You pursue it, you're consumed by it. Time passes, and what time does, it takes away all the good things that you once had. And it gives you a good amount of wrinkles. Okay? Doubt comes about, skepticism comes about, and you come to realize how insufficient you are. And you also come to realize this another really tragic piece of information. You can't help anyone if they're not ready. And no one knows when people get ready for help. I know America is a how-to culture. Whenever someone has a difficulty, there's a book for it, there's an audio book for it, a video clip for it. But the truth is, it's always been a mystery. Jesus couldn't do it. Buddha couldn't do it. No one can do it. So when I first started teaching, like any other relationship in its, infancy stage, I walk into class with a lot of hope. Okay. And time does what it does for all of us. One morning you wake up and you realize you're a little tired. And you no longer want to house students in your office. You no longer want to invite them to your house. And if you do, you become very, very, very selective. You become a Scrooge. So when you ask your question, why do I come to school? Why do I teach? First of all, I've been doing it for about 30 years. When you do anything for that long of a time, you don't do it because you enjoy it sometimes. You do it because it's a habit. It's something you've done. Sometimes I come to campus at 4:30 in the morning in hopes of writing, and I sit at the desk and I try to write and nothing comes out, so I go for a walk for 2 hours. But my intention was to come here to write, but it doesn't happen. So, habit. Do I think more about retirement? Absolutely, every single day. Is it, RV? Yeah. Hello. Yeah.
What are the core principles of human values and why are they important?
When I first started teaching, if I was to ask my students how many of you in this class smoke weed, no hands would ever go up. I'm talking about 30 years ago. People were different. Culture was different. The way they were raised by their parents were different. The advertisement through media was different. There were no Snoop Dogs. There were no Justin Timberlakes. Okay? No technology, therefore people didn't have access to porn that much. The nature of depression and loneliness, the way it is today, wasn't around 30 years ago. Okay. If I was to come to class today and ask how many of you smoke weed, you will have 20 hands up. Now that doesn't mean that 30 years ago people didn't smoke weed, but what it does express is that there was something about the psychology of people some 30 years ago that even though they did smoke, they would never reveal themselves in the classroom as individuals who smoked. There was an element of shame perhaps, element of guilt perhaps, reputation, name, honor, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Today, it's the flip side. If you don't smoke, it's an embarrassment. If you don't watch porn, it's an embarrassment. So your hand goes up. It's the thing we call in the world of ethics as a relativism. That different cultures produce different codes of conduct. As time changes, different forces enter society. Okay? Consider for a moment that in a single day, you're just a 20-year-old kid, right? You go through maybe 5 or 6 or 7 very, very intense mood swings. Now, I don't want to talk about the past and trigger points that may live inside you. But what mood swings do for you is that you hear a song and you're moved into calmness. So when someone calls you, your voice is very calm. And when they say, I need $10, you're more than generous. You give them 20. And you say to yourself, when your friends are in need of help, you're right there as the Messiah to help them out. Then someone bangs into your car. Now you're consumed by anger. Someone else calls you for $10. Now you scream at them. And all of a sudden you realize, well, there are cultural forces, forces in history, and there are the things that happen to you on a daily basis that cause you to behave differently. And all what I'm saying is the following. There is no permanence to who and what we are. We are changing constantly. We love, we hate, we like, we dislike. We're all over the place. Okay. Now, one of the tasks of, I think, if I was to use a very, very cheesy example, I would say the following. Imagine for a moment that you are single. Look around this room. There are lots of attractive young men and young women in this class. Every single one person in this room could be an option for you. Okay? You look at her, you say, wow. You look at him, you say, wow, wow. Okay? So anyone can grab your attention. The moment you become focused on one single human being, if you begin to like Elise, and you spend time with Elise, no other person in this room is going to be an option for you, especially if you are emotionally entangled with Elise, i.e. love or obsessed or infatuated. All the gates would be closed. She would be your sole companion. One of the ways you could remain the same and not change, only death do us part, if you can find something in your life to which you're devoted. Maybe it's just hanging out with kids and educating them how to play basketball really, really well for the next 40, 50 years. You will read books about that, write books about that, hang out with friends who only focus on those things. If, on the other hand, there is no passion in your life, and passion like anything else in life, as time gets in it, you begin to feel the rust. And the thing that used to give you a good amount of passion now suffocates you. It's no longer as interesting. But as long as you have a good amount of passion that's the driving force for who and what you are, for the most part, you will remain the same. I don't know if you know the life story of Mozart. Artists are, to some extent, really crazy. I mean, many of them are, hello, I apologize for not returning your... A lot of artists are introverts. They're very sensitive. Mozart just happened to be a genius. In other words, the moment he came out of his mother, he didn't say milk. He didn't say, give me a hug or embrace me. He just said, where is my piano? Okay, or violin. He was married. It was a rocky marriage. He didn't care. Every time they got into a fight, he would walk out, find himself a room, grab some music sheets, and write a few scores. That was his obsession. Marriage was a footnote to his life. Having children, another footnote to his life. See, none of us in this class are good at anything. And that can become problematic, which means that the world of advertisement can just grab you at any time.
How should we engage with societal rules that we disagree with?
You know, I leave the house around 4, and when I get to Lakeshore, there are traffic lights. And the tragic part of my life is that every time I get to a light, it's red. There is no one in the street. I look to my right, there is nothing. I look to my left, there is nothing. It's like dead. Everything is dead. I just want to drive. Go my way. But I look above the light and there is this camera. I don't know if it works. I don't know if it's not working. I have no idea. But I fear getting a ticket in the mail for about $500. That fear forces me to obey the law. If there were no cameras, I would probably just pass by. You know, if you live in society, you have no choice but to create laws because governing human beings is a mess. I don't know if human beings are monogamous or polygamous. I know that at a certain stage, I look at you and I say, Matthew, I love you. But like anything else, love lives in the hand of time. And I don't love you because you have a great soul. You probably don't even have a soul just yet. I love you because, I suppose, because of some of the crazy, ridiculous, infantile, hippie ideas you have in your head. Okay? And the lifespan of my attraction to you, because it lives on a very superficial basis, is like milk. 2 weeks later, it expired. But the emotions give me the illusions that I must be obligated and responsible in this relationship. At the same time, I look at Richard, I'm attracted to him. I look at her, I'm attracted to her, and say, well, what does this mean? Am I polygamous? Am I monogamous? How far can I go? How far can I push the envelope? And you realize, well, it doesn't really matter if you are polygamous or monogamous, because, especially if you have children. Also, the other tragic factor is emotions are created inside us. Emotions create attachments. Attachments create expectations. You expect things from people. And just in case those expectations are not met, you get hurt. And if I hurt you, what's going to happen is I'm going to look into your eyes and I'm going to see tears. And all of a sudden, empathy is going to come inside me. And it's going to come up. And now the emotions of guilt and shame and remorse and repentance are going to consume me. And all of a sudden, I say, well, maybe I shouldn't hurt him anymore. And it's not because I love you. I just don't want to experience the hurt. If there are things you can get away with, try. If there are things that you're not quite sure you can get away with, don't try. If there are cases where you know you're going to get caught, absolutely refrain from doing them. Richard and Abi and those of us in this class who have kids, and Majesty will experience this soon. Kids will go to Safeway, will go to Costco, they'll grab a chocolate bar, they'll open it and they'll eat it. And you say to them, son, you got to pay for this. Hey, what the hell is that? You know, the idea of private ownership, the idea of buying things, it doesn't make any sense to them. They say, I like, I take, I eat, finished. End of story. You know, I'm not responsible for any of the social obligations that you adults have created. Okay. There is something about us that I think by our very nature rebels against things that constrict us, oppress us. Some of you in this class, maybe it's the tone of my voice, maybe it's my looks, maybe it's the way I express ideas. And all of those things oppress you in the way that you get bored. Boredom is an oppressive place to be, you know, and you keep looking at the clock and it's moving very, very, very slow, and that's what happens in boredom. Things move slow. So how do you free yourself from the bondage of boredom? Well, you become like Casera. You play with your phone. Or you become like the guy in the back. You just fall asleep. I wasn't talking about that guy over there. Okay? Or you then daydream, you fantasize. So, life is just a very, very oppressive container to be in. And your task is to figure out which laws you need to abide by, which laws you can bend, and which laws you can break. And it can be very tricky. My recommendation to all of you students in this class is the following. A lot of classes are being offered online. You don't have to be there physically. Anyone can take the quizzes. Any of your friends can write the assignments. Don't just take 3 units. Don't just take 6 units. Take 21 units. Get it done. You can bend some of the constrictions in academia. Because once things become physical, and I don't think they're going to be, at least as far as 2-year colleges go, you know, Then you have to be in physical classes once you enter like San Francisco State or Stanford. Those are in-person classes. But for now, bend the laws. Plagiarize, just don't get caught. Don't waste your time. Anyone? Erica?
Well, so a lot of your questions are going to resort back to like answering and alcoholism conviction. Why is that?
I have no idea.
Is it done around them, or is it actually people in different ways? Or?
I think in many ways because there is a man I really love. He's dead now. His name is Sigmund Freud. He worked with a lot of people who were in mental institutes. He also focused a good amount of his attention on drugs and alcohol. And there are lots of people who've done this, but because of Sigmund Freud, maybe his beard, maybe it was just the way he put the cigar in his mouth, I'm not really quite sure. But I enjoy what he had to say about just the way human beings are, how difficult life is. And I think alcohol and maybe just alcohol, it really just becomes a symbol for any kind of an addiction. And I suppose the other part has to do with the fact that over the years I've come to understand that a good amount of, many number of my students are addicted to porn, to alcohol, to weed. And sometimes when I used to have more of an open door policy, you could come to my office anytime, they used to come in and share with me their difficulties with consuming too much alcohol or drinking too much or being addicted to porn when they really want to be interested in a healthy relationship, but they can't because they're in the grips of just objectifying anything that walks in front of them. So it's not so much alcohol or drugs, it's just maybe the easiest thing to express how addictions come about and how difficult it is to overcome them. Yeah. Mikai? Yeah.
How do you support someone who's going through like a great loss?
So it's an example I use often whenever this question comes up. Imagine you come to this class on Monday and I'm not here, but my dean is, whose name is Tariq, which in Arabic means the path. Shari'at, tariqat, haqiqat. That I know I'm diverging, but it's okay, or digressing. So you have a set of information. They're very, very inspiring. But the only way you can truly understand the information and embody them is by applying them. That becomes his name, tariqat. And on application, you realize what things you need, what various parts of the information are interesting for you and applicable for you and necessary for you. And the stuff that you don't need is just trash. But let's go back to your question. So you come here on Monday, I'm not here, but my dean is, my boss, Tariq. He says, I'm sorry, Amir is dead. He had a heart attack. Okay. How sad are you going to be? Well, don't answer, I'll answer it for you. Our relationship is about 3 weeks old. Total about 6 or 7, 8 hours. That's it, 10 hours. Okay, that's it. You don't know me, I don't know you. And we haven't really had much of a history. We haven't had much time together to create a history. So the emotional attachment is not as intense. The only thing you're really worried about is, well, damn, does that mean that the class is going to be canceled? What's going to happen to my grade? I took this class to graduate this semester, but now it's going to be delayed. I demand answers, right? And of course, while he's telling you that Amir is dead, sure, you may be sad a little bit, but after 5-10 minutes, you realize that sadness is going to be kind of distracted because other people are asking questions. Well, who's going to read our assignments now? Who's going to grade us now? Are we going to get a replacement? Do you know who it is, when it is, how it is, right? So, the degree to which you will be sad will be about maybe 5 minutes. Now, there is something you need to understand about human beings, and that's the following. If you're a human being, and if your past has not been one of trauma, in other words, you don't have trust issues, you don't have faith issues, and you don't have relationship issues, it means that when you walk into this class, after a few weeks, you and I will have an intimate relationship. And you're okay with that. If on the other hand, you've been betrayed in the past, you're going to take 1 step forward and 5 steps back. Okay? Which means that you've learned from your own experiences that you will give in every relationship 20% of who and what you are, and you will protect yourself 75%. Just in case the other person runs away, walks away, betrays you, you're only hurt 25%. Which means that your sadness, your grief, your loss, your despair will only be for 2 days, maybe 3 days. Okay? Now consider the flip side. Imagine you like me, and we just didn't meet this semester. You've been in my classes, kind of like Abi. She came to my class at the age of 18. She's now 45. That's a 20-year history. Now, I don't really know how she feels about me, because in Near Eastern, Middle Eastern culture, we're very, very reserved with our emotions and the way we express ourselves. Because of that history, and despite the fact that she's not really enrolled in this class, but she's been coming every single day to all of my classes for the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I'm just going to create a story. Because there's a sense of attachment, because she comes to the house, because she hangs out with the kids and we hang out with her kids, because once in a while, if we have gatherings, she's there present, just in case she comes to class on Monday expecting me to be here, but gets the news that I'm dead, her grief is going to be very, very different than yours. You have suffered a loss. The thing you need to understand about human beings, whenever you become attached to anything, whether it's your wallet, your jacket, another human being, your mom, your dad, your sister, brother, the moment you lose them, and loss is a necessary fact in life. Jamila has a son. Every parent, every mother who gets pregnant, prior to this kid coming out, they have stories. I'm going to move to Montclair. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to win the lotto. I'm going to buy a mansion. My kid is going to go to private school. And life shits on those dreams, little by little. Okay? But you have attachment to those stories. Okay? And every time life takes those stories away, there's a part of you that's always going to be in a grieving mode. Okay? So how you grieve, how intensely you grieve, and for how long you grieve, it depends on the sort of attachment you have with the thing that you have lost. One of the most, I think, psycho-spiritual, philosophical traditions that you will ever encounter in your life is Buddhism. It's not like Christianity, that's stupid. Islam, another stupid tradition. Judaism, even more stupid.
As somebody who is raised Jewish,
One of the nice things about Buddhism is the following. It's a very simple teaching. If you're a human being, accept one fact in life. You will suffer. You will suffer. There is no hope. There is nothing you can do to get rid of suffering. You will suffer because you will grow old. You will suffer because your hopes and dreams will die. You will suffer because you fall in love and life takes that love away from you. Not because the person dies. You just don't feel the same for them anymore. And as long as you can do that and know that and live that, you will walk into life. You will suck the marrow out of life, as Emerson would say. And you will say, you know what? I'm going to have fun right now. At the same time, I know in 2 minutes' time that fun is going to go away. Introverts and extroverts grieve differently. Now, the thing you need to know about introverts is that they are feelers. Okay? Introverts have a tendency of whatever experience they have out there, they inject it inside them. Extroverts, they make their grief communal. In other words, let's have a gathering, let's all sit and cry, for example. But there is one very important component you need to know about sadness or loss or grief. You're always going to be alone. Always. And I think the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was right. And you have two options whenever you grieve. You will either cry, that's the only language available to you, or you will laugh. And you don't laugh because it's funny. There comes a point when my grandfather passed away some 30 years ago. All of us, we were having a music gathering, and someone called us from Iran saying, your father, your grandfather died. So the music gatherings becomes like a funeral service, if you will. So all of us sit and cry. Strangers, familiar faces, doesn't really matter. After about 5 or 6 hours, everybody bursts into laughter. So what you have is another shade or another expression of sorrow or grief. Now that's not about tears. It's about laughter. You laugh as an expression, the output of grief. So people grieve differently. Now, if your question is, how do you come to accept your loss? No one knows. Some people are over it after 2 weeks. Some people, despite being profoundly attached, overcome grief after like 5 months, some 2 years, some never. So it really depends on so many moving parts. But the most important thing you need to know is that eventually grief will push you into a place of complete loneliness. Language fails you, books fail you. It's kind of like Noah, if you know the story from the Old Testament. You find yourself on this boat, and the water is rough, and there is no one except you. Jamila, yeah.
Even though everybody, usually has pretty much the right to feel like how they feel, believe in what they feel, as far as religion, hierarchy, why do people in society feel that like somebody maybe gives a fuck what they feel? Don't you feel like religion should never be debated? It should just be discussed. Should religion be just discussed but not debated? Like everybody's entitled to how they feel, right? So why do society feel the need to express what they don't agree with, and it becomes like a debate about religion? Like when in all actuality, like whatever I believe in, whatever you believe in, it really don't matter. That's my belief.
Okay. Let me change your question slightly. Okay. Replace the word religion with having a child. Okay. So you have two forces now. You have your son or your daughter, let's say they are 20, and they feel whatever the way they want to feel. And they want to live whatever way they want to live. And then there is you. Okay. The father or the mother. And we talked about this in the last class, where you're not 20, you're not 30, you're not 40, you're like a 60-year-old man or a woman. Okay, you've gone through a lot of ups and downs in life. And one of the things that life does, hopefully, and you do, is at a certain point, you lock yourself in a room, whether it's a physical room or an emotional room or a psychological room or a spiritual room, where you sit and you sit back like an alcoholic and you say, okay, I want to figure out why I drank so much. I want to figure out what the hell is wrong with me. and you begin to take notes and you begin to make some observations. You pay attention, okay? And out of the attention, you extract this thing called wisdom. You come to realize all the reasons that drove you to drink alcohol, to become addicted to alcohol, to eventually being given a label, an alcoholic, okay? Now, you've overcome all of that. You stand on the outside because you've understood a few things about yourself and about life and complexities of life. You look at your son and you say, don't do A, B, C, D. And your son looks at you and says, Mom or Dad, you live your life, I will live my life. And you sit them down and say, I know what it means to be 20. I've been 20, but you have no idea what it means to be 60. Okay? And the point I'm trying to make, when you live in society, you have different people at different stages of maturity and different stages of insights. Okay? I'm just going to assume that you happen to have come from a Christian tradition. The very presence of Jesus on this planet, if the stories are true about him, that he actually did have a historical existence, if the story of Jesus is true, his very presence down here is a judgment on the rest of us. That our lives are cheesy, cheap, superficial, and stupid. When he opens his mouth, that's another set of judgment on us. That our lives are stupid, cheap, superficial, and we are just idiots. And then he does even something more fascinating. He rejects the rest of us and only accepts 12. That's another kind of judgment. And the point I'm trying to make is this. In society, you have some people who are at level 1, some on level 2, some on level 3, some on level 5. Okay? And so as you go up, you can see more. Sometimes when you see more, your compassion can be gentle or it can be profoundly vigorous. That depends on your temperament, your experience, your youth, your age, all those things. The other thing you need to kind of pay attention to is language. I don't know what you mean by religion. I don't know how well you understand religion. But let me give you perhaps a story that may express religion in a relatively creative way. Okay? Sorry, do you have any questions or comments before we... Yeah, no? Okay. Yeah. No. Okay.
My comment is that I like nature. That's my comment.
Good. There is this fish, the salmon fish. It has a very, very, very interesting life, Jamila. It's an egg, lives under a rock for a while, and then the force of the river or the pond pushes this egg downwards until it reaches the sea, or the bigger part of this pool of water. And by the time it gets to the bottom, it's like a living, quacking fish. Walking around, swimming around, quacking around. And as the fish is just living his or her life, they have friends, they have parents, they go to church, they go to the mosque, they read books, they go partying here and there. At a certain point, something really strange happens to the salmon's psychology. And I don't know why it happens. And I'm using this particular example because it's very much close to how and what we go through and what we feel sometimes. All of a sudden, the salmon, and I don't know how it happens, and you could call it both a curse and a blessing. Despite being in this pool of water for about 20, 30 years, has a house, has a job, has money, has a companion, has children, all that stuff, the salmon one morning wakes up and says, I don't belong here. It doesn't make any sense. This has been your home for 30 years. What sort of a question is this? I don't belong here. Now, goes around asking his companions or her companions or it companions all sorts of questions. Do you guys feel the same way? Do you feel strange, abandoned, orphaned, lonely, depressed, sad, homeless? No, we don't feel any of those things. But you see, for the salmon fish, it just doesn't stay a question. Sometimes we ask questions not because we feel them. We just think about them. You listen to an audio, you write down a question, and you bring it to class and say, I have a question. And it's a thinking question. There are no feelings behind it. The problem with the salmon is that there is a good amount of intense feeling of abandonment. I have a house, it's no longer a home. I have a wife, but it feels like I'm lonely. I have kids, but I feel abandoned. This is my life, but I feel lifeless. It's like all the passion that you have inside you are flushed down the toilet. Okay? Now, what usually happens in the life of the salmon is that he or she or it tries to find answers. Surely I can make this work. These questions will go away. Let me just distract myself by reading a book, by having sex, by drinking, by smoking. Tragically enough for the salmon fish, it doesn't go away. And the salmon does something that usually salmons are not supposed to do, or none of us in this class ought to do. Salmon begins to go against the current of the water. If the water is going this way, the salmon goes the opposite direction. And it happens at the worst time, spring. The bears are no longer asleep. They're really hungry because they haven't eaten food for about 4 to 6 months. They're all awake. And every time a fish flies upwards, gets devoured by the bears. Now, there is another thing about the salmon that you will understand, which is the salmon now has a GPS. It's intuitive. It's instinctual. It doesn't come from reading books. It doesn't come from asking people. It just says, I have a certain feeling. I'm just going to follow those feelings. And you know where those feelings lead the salmon fish? The salmon eventually finds the place where he was once a tiny little egg. Once the salmon gets to the top of the place he once was, he lays the eggs and dies. Now, one could say that religion means that all of us were born by a creator. That's one way of looking at religion. Another says, well, life is governed by God. That's another definition, not bad. Another says, well, God has given me a wife, a husband, kids, a nice house, right? And just in case there are wrinkles or difficulties in any of those areas, you know what church to go to. And you say, God, my husband has cancer, heal him. My kids are ABCD, heal them. That's another way of religion. There is another approach to religion, is you begin to ask religious questions. Who am I? What am I? But they remain as an intellectual force. Then there is another way of looking at religion, which is you begin to ask religious questions, but with a tremendous amount of emotional force. But then they get forgotten. Life comes in, your kids scream, you have a job, you have classes, you have assignments, then they go into the background. Then you have another aspect of religion, which is, in as much as you want to try to forget these questions because they're so painful, they won't go away. And the path that the salmon fish took was very much the path that Jesus took. At the age of 12, if the stories are right, he says, you know what? None of this stuff makes any sense. Judaism makes no sense, right? My parents don't make sense. Society doesn't make sense. The rabbinical tradition don't make sense. I'm just going to leave. For 18 long years, he goes away. Where, who, what, when, nobody knows. But when he comes back, It tries to unite people, only to realize nobody likes it. That's another definition for religion. And the point I'm trying to make is language is layered by perspectives, and those perspectives are generated depending on people's maturity, insight, experience, and eloquence. Your son may have a beautiful life that he likes, but that life may not work for you. So you're going to let him go for the next 10 years, hoping that one day he'll knock on your door saying, Mom, you were right, I was wrong. That's a life that's not going to work for you. Any one? Derek.
Positive and negative type of society, because to say like today in America we're all like lonely and depressed, but if you go back then where like religion was where 50% of the population, they're probably the less depressed than most. So people think it's a more negative or positive.
I think if you're really, really depressed and all of a sudden there's a knock on your door and there are two 18-year-old Mormons saying, I want to sell you Jesus Christ, and you happen to be open to their message, that's good for you. You know, I don't know how long of a life shelf it's going to have, but the fact that two 18-year-olds with this ridiculous book and ridiculous set of ideas were able to inspire you and drive you out of depression and give you some hope and inspiration, that's great. Now you can go out on the lake and walk around and, you know, look for a companion, drink your coffee, enjoy the sunshine. It's beautiful. Whether or not your depression will come back, that's a different story. Now, is it true that human beings enjoy power? Yeah. Is it true that sometimes power gets in the hands of immature people, unreflective people, bullies? Yeah. Is it true that they can use religion to exploit other people? Yeah. A lot of things in life really is just a matter of luck. Who walks into your life? Who sells you what? What are you open to receive? How are they going to sell it to you? And what you purchase, how are you going to use it? Anyone else before we...
Did we miss Ro? Did I miss?
Oh, Jamila, you're here.
Did you do roll?
What would be your best advice for
For the what? For the weekend? I don't know, enjoy time with your family, if you like them.
That's my advice.
Stephen, as always, thank you. Any one else? We have like a minute or two. Yeah.
We're trying to engage in introspection with ourselves, thinking about our lives and our experiences. How can we keep that constructive and keep ourselves away from falling into anxiety about our life, our choices?
It's something we talked about yesterday in class, but I'll just give it to you like the cliff version. Sometimes you engage in introspection or reflective exercises when you're single. The only person you have to answer to is yourself, nobody else. You can walk in and out of relationships, and whoever you hurt, you hurt. You know, it's none of your business really, okay? There are these other times where you're already in a relationship and you got into a relationship for whatever the reasons may have been. All of a sudden you enter a different stage of your own intellectual, psychological growth where you become interested in thinking exercises, sitting back, observing, pay attention, caring, taking notes, figuring out why, where, who, and what. The conclusions you come to or the time you take to sit back and figure out your life means that you have to take time away from your family and spend that time for yourself. Now, when you go back to your family after having come to some conclusions about your life, is that you're not going to walk to your family as a blank slate. You go in with a good amount of insights now. And those insights, and you're not doing this with your wife or your husband or your kids. You're doing it in a very solitary fashion. Okay? And that's one of the difficulties with being in a relationship, living life. All of a sudden there's a disruption and it's intense. And all of a sudden you try to communicate your emotions with your companion only to realize they don't really understand what the hell you're talking about. And now you realize you're more alone in the relationship than if you were single. Okay? If you are single and in the exercise of introspection and reflection, you'll be fine. If on the other hand, you're in a relationship, you're in a very, very, very difficult place. Number one, and I come from a tradition where I had a teacher for about 10, 15 years. So I didn't do any of this on my own. And I don't believe anyone should do any of this on their own. I think if there is any growth to be had spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, you need to have a teacher. Remember, introspection, consider it to be like an art. It's like learning how to play the piano. You need someone to teach you. One of the mistakes I made as a musician is that I don't like people telling me what to do and how to do it. So whenever I went to a teacher to learn how to play the tar, the sitar, the tambour, I didn't want to follow their advice. So after about 2, 3, 4, 5 months, I just left them and I just went home and played the same old stuff. 40 years have passed by. I still play the same music. Nothing about me has changed. I haven't grown. So much so that when I pick up the santur to play, I get bored. Because it's the same old stuff. If on the other hand, I had a teacher, I would know for the most part the ins and outs of some of the Persian traditional instruments. And I could sit and play for hours. So because of my own background, which has created a good amount of biases and prejudices, which I think are healthy, whenever someone says, I want to do this on my own, I say, don't do it. Don't do it on your own. If you do it on your own, you will divorce. You will come to realize how lonely you have become because of introspection, how lonely you have forced your wife or husband to be, and your kids don't feel as if they have a father or a husband or a mother. You know, one of the things that our teacher did, just in case, and we had one person who was married, there were only 3 of us for about 10 years. Lots of people came and went, but he was married. Then he entered into this idea of like reflective life. It ruined his life. And there were many times he said, I want a divorce. And our teacher said, no, you can't. And it was also a time in our culture where you wouldn't divorce. Okay? You just couldn't, culturally. So there's a lot of damage that takes place, and you need someone who's been there, who's done that, who knows the ins and outs. And I know you don't speak Persian, and I know you don't read Persian poetry, but I gotta tell you, about maybe 25% of Persian poetry that deals with emotional, intellectual, spiritual growth, their advice is following. There are going to be lots of pitfalls, dark corners. You're going to hit a lot of blind spots. Make sure you have a guide who's able to see things and who's been there, who's done that. You know, I wouldn't suggest you pursuing any like living physical teachers. I think books are really, really good. You know, not even YouTube clips of people. Books are really, really good. I think for the first maybe 10 years of your life, you should just sit and read books. A variety of different books by a variety of different people. You know, consume a good amount of information. And if you're earnest, if you're a good student, eventually you'll be able to extract the good stuff from the bad. Any other questions before we... Derek?
You said replace the
I'm sorry?
You said we should just read books. Like, what kind of books should we read?
Well, email me. Email me, I'll tell you what books to read. I think right now you shouldn't read any books. I think right now the only focus you should have is take about 15, 16 units a semester. Get this stuff done. Get done your classes. Go to a 4-year school, get your master's, not just the bachelor's. Unless you do computer science, it's a different story. You know, if you're doing soft sciences, make sure you get your master's. And then if you want to like read, if you want to like go into the woods, fine. Now you have power. Go into leave life with power. Right now you're just a kid. You got zero power. And these books are not going to be helpful. They're going to push you further out of life. And that's not what you want. All right, so listen, it's good to see you. If you're an immigrant, don't go out too much. If your status is illegal, get married to an American. Have a nice day.
The only